مساء الخير أهلا وسهلا السلام عليكم. عايز أتكلم عربي لكن دلوقتي
I do not speak Arabic very well, but hopefully later on,
so I have to switch to English
at
now.
some
Sorry
point,
for that.
I can speak Arabic fluently. I will speak now. Switch now to Arabic.
Through play, or maybe play through learning in a way or another this very morning, and thank you very much for joining us. We have three different persons on the stage, three different personalities, three different backgrounds. Because we're going to talk about learning through play, and because, of course, ladies first, I would like, first of all, to ask Dr. Ella Eckert here, who comes from Germany, to introduce herself briefly before we start with the presentations. Ella, please, you have the floor.
Well, I started my career as a home language teacher in Sweden, where I have lived for 30 years. And then I came to know two children who came from a different background. And this was so astonishing. They were Montessori children, and they were so different, very open-minded, very curious. And then I started to study this concept, and I went to training. I worked as a Montessori teacher, Montessori trainer, and now I'm chairman for the German Montessori Society.
Thank you very much, Ella. Dr. Zoran Popovic, who is coming all the way from Seattle, Washington, but is only flying from Washington, D.C. when coming to Qatar. Please, Zoran, introduce yourself.
Hi. I'm a director of Center for Game Science, where one of our main objectives is to figure out how to use gameplay as the primary framework for learning that will not only enable anybody anywhere to learn about anything that they would like to learn about, but also empower them to be able to feel like what they're learning is fun and they would like to continue it for the rest of their lives. So that's the ultimate goal of the center.
Thank you very much, Zoran. Before I briefly introduce myself and give my presentation, a few indications that you might find interesting. So the session will be divided in two parts, basically. First of all, there will be a small debate, a short debate between the panelists here, and after there will be a Q&A session with you, participants in the room, and as you know, new this year at WISE via MyWISE and Twitter, questions we'll get during the session. In order to make sure that your headsets work correctly, please do not place any item in front of the remote, and you have all these informations on the screen anyway. As for the translation channels, they will also appear on the screen. So my name is Bruno della Chiesa. As you can take it from my first name, I have a German origin. From my last name, I have an Italian origin. I have a French passport. I feel more or less European. And I've been working for the last 12 years at the OECD, based in Paris, and teaching at Harvard Graduate School of Education, basically working on neuroscience and learning, educational neuroscience, sometimes called, but my background is in linguistics, especially social linguistics and didactics of languages. And today I want to introduce this discussion very briefly with a small presentation based on neuroscience called Playing the Glass Bead Game. First of all, everybody should know that brain research, as interesting as it seems, as interesting as it is not likely to solve any educational problem. It's not the role of science to solve educational problems. It's the role of science to inform decision makers, researchers, practitioners, teachers about what we know about, in that case, the way the brain works, that is, the way the brain learns, but not to make decisions on what to do. This is the role of ethics, not the role of science. However, it doesn't mean that it's not interesting at all, because findings from brain research in cognitive neuroscience can at least shed new lights on old issues, raise new questions, and inform ideology-dominated debates of pre-scientific nature. The brain challenge, as we called it when we started this back in 1999, so it's almost a teenager now, is the following. We consider at the OECD and at Harvard that a dialogue is necessary between the neuroscientific community on the one hand and the education community on the other, on an international level, in order to reply to questions of technical and scientific nature, of social and economic nature, and of ethical and political nature. So there's very complex issues there. However, we have learned more in the last 20 years about the brain, about the human brain and the way it works, again, the way it learns, than in the whole history of mankind before. Therefore, as educators, we cannot possibly ignore what brain research and neuroscience has to tell us. Why now? Well, as I said, we've learned a lot in the last 20 years, but basically it's only the beginning. What neuroscience is about to discover, the insights that are going to come from this area are so overwhelming that it's something not only educators, but nobody can really ignore for the decades to come. And this is, of course, the result of the impact brain technologies have made on how we can observe the working brain, the learning brain, which was not possible before without scanners. You know, when you have to work with dead brains, the brain of dead people, it's extremely difficult to determine how the brain actually learns. So we have to deal with discoveries with educational implications, especially with the notions of brain plasticity, very good news for us all, as you will see, and of brain periodicity, the sensitive periods within our brains in order to learn something specific or to acquire specific skills. And I would like here, given the topic of this debate, to underline the crucial role emotions are playing in learning processes. For decades and decades, if not centuries, learning was considered a mere cognitive process where emotions were, at best, neglected. However, the more we know about the brain, the more we discover how far, how deep emotions are influencing learning. Positive emotions, negative emotions. Pleasure, joy of learning is the positive thing, leads to motivation, certain forms of very positive motivation. One example of a very negative emotion that is related to learning, but in a bad way, is fear. As soon as you experience fear or anxiety, you don't learn that well anymore. Of course, that's common sense, but now, thanks to brain imaging technologies, we can even show why. So this is the sort of fMRI scanners that have been used in the last 2 decades and which allow us to more or less locate what's happening in the brain when the brain is performing a specific task. Like, for instance, how the brain operates, which brain circuitry, which brain areas are involved in social decision making. These fMRI scanners are huge machines which are extremely heavy to use. And fortunately, some Japanese colleagues have developed a new technology based on near-infrared devices called optical topography, and now they have prototypes of WOT, wearable optical topography. You can see that on the screen. This guy wears something that actually measures the activity in his neocortex. That means the part of the brain that is specific to human beings. The good thing about this is that it's very light. You can wear it as a cap, or as a keffieh for that matter, and after a while, you completely forget that you have it on your skull. With this, there is no noise, as we call it, no interference in the measurements. And of course, we start to be able to measure the activity of 2 brains when communicating with one another, which is, of course, extremely relevant for education and for a lot of other purposes. Well, this is a synapse, very simplified. You certainly know what a synapse is, a connection between two neurons. And we have millions and millions of synapses in our brain. Learning from a brain perspective, from a neurological perspective, from, well, at cell level, if you wish, has to do with synapses. You develop synapses, new ones, you prune old ones, you reinforce synapses, and you weaken some others, depending on what happens when you learn. And since the brain learns constantly, the brain is a lifelong learning device. You can't help but have the brain learn all the time. That means that you are configurating, reconfigurating, deconfigurating again and again your synaptic connectivity. And as Eric Kandel, the Nobel Prize for Medicine, said once, synaptic changes parallel behavioral changes. With this in mind, we have calculated the development of synapses and the elimination of synapses across the lifespan. As you can see here, in infancy, it is particularly strong. But of course, it continues throughout life. When I was a child, I remember that I was told once in a biology course that we had a certain number of neurons at the very beginning of our life, and we would lose thousands and thousands of neurons on a daily basis, which is absolutely frightening. I thought, gosh, I'm getting more and more stupid with every day. Is this possible? Well, when you are 12 or 13, you observe the world around you, and you have a lot of proof for that. Fortunately, it is not the case. Not only, well, yes, we lose neurons every day, but this doesn't matter that much, because we create new ones, and intelligence, whatever you understand under this word, is not related to a number of neurons. Plasticity and periodicity in a few words. There are particular sensitive periods that exist for different types of learning, meaning that depending on what you want to learn, the knowledge you want to acquire, or the skills you want to develop, there are periods in life which are better than others. You learn easier, you learn faster, but it's only an optimal period. It is not a critical period as if the window would slam shut afterwards. Meaning that you can learn anything at any age. Not the same way, sometimes it will require more effort and etc. But some things are learned actually better as an adult than as a child. Emotions, as I said, and again, this is directly related to the topic today, play a crucial role in the learning process, if not the essential role, because it's related to motivation and related to the environment. The remarkable plasticity of the brain makes it a lifelong learning device, as I said, and it makes remediation for learning disorders possible, even if not diagnosed at a very early age. If we have time, I will give details for that. In other words, and in spite of what the proverb, the saying, has it, you can teach an old dog new tricks. It is possible at any age. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? It takes a while for the dog to acquire that skill, and the other animals too, but basically that's the idea. As an example, literacy in the brain, our brain was developed to acquire language, to understand and produce language, but it was not developed for reading, or writing for that matter, because these are relatively new human activities, and we don't have the evolution time necessary already to have reading and writing in our brains. So sensitive periods for language learning exists, as I said. Early periods of life for phonetics and phonology, a bit longer for grammar and syntax. And the good news, the older you get, the better you get at learning semantics and vocabulary. As far as reading is concerned, many cases of dyslexia due to difficulties with phonemic awareness could be diagnosed very early, in Finland especially, by Heikki Lytinen and his team, as early as the age of 1 year. And of course, after that, since the early diagnosis is there, it was possible to have these kids go through a playing video in order to have phonemic training in order to improve decoding skills. We'll hear about video games afterwards with my two colleagues. If you want more details about this, you can find that in the book published 4 years ago already by the OECD, available in several languages and very soon in Arabic. We're very happy about that, called Understanding the Brain, the Birth of a Learning Science. The learning brain is a product of interaction between nature, genetics on the one hand, and nurture, the environment, on the other. So the debate about, nature, nurture is now over from a scientific point of view, at least as far as the brain is concerned. Beyond the importance of emotions and motivational stimuli, we have the importance of learning environment and play. There is solid scientific evidence to show that emotionally positive approaches to learning are more efficient than others. To support the idea of making learning pleasurable even at school, children love to learn, they love to understand, they love to discover the world around them. They experience the joy of learning on a daily basis. Unfortunately, very often when they reach schools, then at school they don't experience the same pleasure anymore. Why is that? What is it we should do about it? And of course, this scientific evidence to support or not, doesn't support sometimes existing theories about learning and teaching, theories and practices. And it shows why and how successful teaching methods work. Now my question is, could learning and playing be one and the same thing? Not only learning through play, but learning as playing. This is an idea that Hermann Hesse, the German-Swiss author who became the Nobel Prize winner in literature in 1952, if I remember well, but I'm not sure, maybe in the last 40s. In his book, Das Glasperlenspiel, the glass bead game, developed, among other things. The glass bead game is a game of the mind, which brings together knowledge, skills, know-how, beauty, art, faith, and a lot of other elements that are so essential to human beings. It's very important because it's our future which is at stake. After one look at this planet, any visitor from outer space would say, I want to see the manager. This is not from me. This is from William Burroughs. Unfortunately, he died before I could meet with him. But if I had met with him one day, I would have told him, look, Bill, I completely agree with you. But you know what? We human beings are in charge of this planet. That's the point. We are the managers. Anyway, I hope that we will have a great discussion now, not only based on neuroscience, but have some sort like a rising brain with which we'll be able to dance together with our brains. I believe in collective intelligence in order to make our brains stronger, not to forget spiritual uplift, but keep our feet on earth anyway, because this is where we have to act and deal. Thank you very much. Shukran awi.